Let me start off by saying, before this experience, I did not believe in Bigfoot. I always assumed that if it was real, some hunter would have killed one by now. I live in deep East Texas. My two friends and I'll call them John and Josie, were heading to what Josie had referred to as the spot. It was only about a 45-minute drive, and the sun had just set as we pulled into a parking lot in the middle of the woods. John and I had never been here before, nor did we realize the reason why Josie had taken us here. As we get out, we notice an expensive-looking SUV that had all the gear on it that you see on those phony TV shows Bigfoot hunters use. As we pass them by, Josie decides to ask the two middle-aged men who were now standing beside the vehicle what they were doing. They replied in the most blunt of matter-of-fact way that you could say, "Looking for Bigfoot?" John and I nearly couldn't control our laughter when the man said this. We are East Texas natives, yet had never seen or heard anything of that couldn't be explained by the many animals Texas has to offer. After a short, unconvincing conversation about Bigfoot being real, the two men decided to join us on the trails. They each carried them night vision goggles, heat-sensing goggles, a red flashlight, and a Glock 45 handgun, among other things. The two men now, persistent on turning John and I into believers, followed us behind, making the best use of their equipment. After about a mile, the wooden stairs, then man-made posts disappear, as the trail descends gradually around 30 feet below the normal height of the trail, forming a valley of sorts. The two men that joined us had explained that there are a few different types. There's a large red-haired one that has a cone-shaped head. He is more aggressive, one of the pack. Then there's the gray walker, as he called it. He is the largest and the one that is most frequently seen and heard from. They know what guns are, the men explain. They're very intelligent. If they're out hunting tonight, you'll hear the coyotes first. They follow them, waiting for the scraps. They'll go crazy all at once when the kill is made, they had said. After an uneventful yet unsettling hour in the woods, we started to head back down the trail the way we came. I stopped to pee on the side of the trail, and a few others did the same since we were drinking pretty heavily. What happened next, I will never forget. Off in the distance, seemingly just on the other side of the valley, came a very deep and blood-curdling sound that came from an animal I had never heard before. At this point, John and I were shaking. We had dropped everything in our hands and were standing dead still, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Then, just as the two men said, the coyote started going crazy like I had never heard before. Still frozen in the air, I somehow managed to make out a few words. Something along the lines of, "Are you fucking serious?" Then came the whooping call once more. This time, the coyotes went dead silent. Everything did. At that moment, the entire world was quiet. There were no more crickets. There was no more wind. Nothing. The silence was almost maddening. Within a few minutes, the sound returned, and the forest came back to life, and we continued walking the way we came. Another hour passes, and nothing more had happened. At some point, we had all asked the men about their sidearms, so they took them out and let us hold them on the way back. We had stopped and shined our flashlight on the guns to check them out. Almost immediately after doing this, we all heard a loud crash in the forest. What we all recognized as a tree breaking and falling. Yet, it didn't sound like it broke and fell. It sounded like a loud snap. Trees that are falling creak. This tree had been broken and thrown in our direction. Immediately, one of the men said, "That's our invitation out of here," in a very frightened tone. They quickly holstered their weapons and turned off their flashlights as they led us out of the woods. We got in our car and got the hell out of there. This happened directly to me. At the time of this story, I was a 12-year-old male who lived in California. For a summer trip, me and my family flew to Boise, Idaho for a week to stay with cousins. We stayed at their house for 2 days, then came to the best part. It was the best part until what happened, that is. On the third day, we drove to a small city in the Rocky Mountains of central Idaho. They owned a cabin in Ketchum. The first day was fishing at nearby lakes, playing games, and meeting a few of the neighbors on the small street. Everyone we met was nice. It was amazing. I thought nothing could go wrong. Before I say more, here's a layout of the area. The room where I slept was at the back of the house. There was no fence at the back of the backyard because it was on the bank of a freezing cold river. Directly on the other side of the river was a huge mountain covered by thick forest of pine trees. A small path starts on the other side of the river, but there's no bridge. There's not a way that you could get across, really. I went to bed that night. I woke up at 2 a.m. needing to use the bathroom. I got up and did my thing and then headed back to my room. As I got to my bed, I felt hot, so I opened my window. Not 15 minutes after I opened my window, I heard the most terrifying screech come from the forest. It was raspy, but high-pitched. I know for a fact it wasn't human. I've heard stories from the channels on YouTube that often describe creatures that make weird noises that are sort of human but aren't. I heard it once more, but this time it was closer. In the morning, when I woke up, we explored all around. At 7 p.m., me, my sister, and my cousin got permission from our parents to go explore the forest. I was uneasy, considering I had heard creepy human-like noises in the night before. And it was already nearing night. The oldest cousin, Alex, who was 16, took a loaded pistol, a lighter, and a backpack of snacks. I carried a hunting knife and a flashlight. The cousin my age, Julia, took just a flashlight. My sister, Brianna, and the other cousin, Karina, who were 10, took some extra batteries and a small bag of candy each. We made our way across the bridge at the end of the street and back to the path of the side that the river crosses from the house. All of us began to hike to the top of the mountain. We made it to the top of Bald Mountain in an hour and a half. The view from 9,000 feet was incredible. At 8:55, Alex and I figured it was time to head down and ordered the group to the path. At this point, it was dark now, and the sun had fully set. Julia and I had turned on our flashlights and shined them ahead as we walked. Some halfway down the mountain, which was about 45 minutes into the walk, I got the dreadful feeling you get when you know you're being watched and followed. Seconds later, something that was hiding in the bushes a few yards in the tree line that bordered the path ran off into our right. I brushed it off as some type of small animal, but 5 minutes after that incident, what we heard made me tingle with fear and my heart dropped to my stomach. The same horrifying screech from last night echoed through the forest from a mile or two away. I told everyone we needed to move faster, and we did. It went off again, but closer. Again, and closer. Whatever this thing was, it was moving faster than we were. We were full on speed walking by then. That still wasn't fast enough because the screeching stopped and we heard loud steps 30 yards off to the right. I got the feeling of being watched again. Alex took his gun and fired 2 shots in the general direction of the steps. The creature backed off, but even though we thought he was gone, I still sensed that we were being watched. As the river came into sight, it caught me and everyone else by surprise. I heard the path gravel crunching behind us. I looked back into the darkness. I saw the outline of something that resembled a human on the path behind us, with about 200 yards of distance between us. I told Alex and his face went pale when he looked. The rest of the group quietly, and on 3, we all broke out into a run towards the river. Whatever that thing was, it was extremely fast. When we reached the river, there wasn't time to get into the bridge a quarter mile away. We jumped in and swam across the ice-cold water. It got to the river just as we made it to the bank and into the backyard. Julia and I shined our flashlights and finally got a good look at it. It was massive. It was a hairy creature that was about 7 feet tall. It had huge, razor-sharp claws like a bear's. Its eyes glowed red when the flashlight shined on them. Alex shot at it and it darted off with one final screech. We all looked at each other in pure terror, shock, and surprise. Alex explained everything to our parents. They didn't know what to make of it and had never heard of anything like it. I'm thankful nothing happened to us and I noticed the creature behind us. If I didn't, I don't know what would have happened. The next time I stay at that cabin, though, I'm not going into those woods at night. This happened during the summer when I was in middle school. I lived out in the country at the time and was surrounded by cornfields. I was having a slumber and early birthday party since my birthday is in December. So, I had a bunch of my best friends over. As a little girl, you get really excited about slumber parties and all of that. I believe this was on a Saturday, if my memory serves me right. We spent the day going down the water slide my parents had set up for me and my friends. We were having a really good time, running in and out of the sprinkler and taking turns down the slide. It was getting close to the evening and getting a little closer, so we packed up the stuff and went inside to get dried and into some nice dry clothes. After we had dinner, me and my friends went back out to play outside for a little longer before we went to bed. I don't exactly remember what we were doing, but it's a pretty good guess that we were doing cartwheels and flips on the side of the driveway in the grass next to the cornfield. I can't remember if it was me or my friends that saw it first. Out in the middle of the field was this white thing. We just kind of stared at it for a bit, and they asked me what it was. I told them it was probably a white tube that sticks out of the ground for irrigation. Then we noticed that it was starting to move. This thing was probably a mile away from us. It didn't look like a human or an animal. It was just like this white thing, kind of milky in color. Whenever we would move, this thing would just take a step toward us. And when we would move toward it, it would take a step back. This thing went on for a minute or so. Me and my friends just stood there, and this thing started getting closer and closer. We ran for the house and was trying to all fit through the doorway at the same time. We were all screaming and freaking out and told my parents what was happening. They just laughed at it and said it was probably just our imagination. So we stayed in for the rest of the night. The next day it was gone, and I've never seen it since. And that was 15 years ago. I have been in a long-distance relationship with my girlfriend for a couple of years, and every summer and winter break, I'm able to travel to go see her. This encounter happened about 2 years ago at my girlfriend's house. I should mention that my girlfriend lives on the outskirts of her city in Mexico, where houses are around 200 to 300 yards apart and surrounded by dense woods. Usually, days and nights there go by peacefully, accompanied by the sound of the woods and the occasional car passing by from others who live nearby. I had always considered her place to be perfect to spend time outdoors, until this occasion. Honestly, I don't think I've ever been this scared in my life. This sighting will be carved in my mind forever. On a chilly night of December, I was at my girlfriend's house. I had planned to spend the night with her since she would have been by herself that day. Her mom was out of town, and she didn't want her to stay by herself either. We were having dinner in the kitchen at around 8 p.m. We chatted about activities we could do tomorrow, tasks her mom asked her to do, how much we missed each other, among others. After about an hour of conversation and laughs, we decided to go into the living room and cuddle on the couch, watching TV. We both got up and put the dishes in the sink. She went into her bedroom, and I went outside to the bathroom. The house layout consisted of a long corridor that connected pretty much every room in the house, and a back door at the end of the corridor which led to the patio. The patio was open, full of trees, plants, and the only thing that separated the patio from the woods was a fence made up of stones and barbed wire that stood at around a meter tall. Halfway down the patio, there was the bathroom, being lit by a single and weak light bulb. So, if anyone wanted to go, they had to walk outside, even if it had to be in the middle of the night. I'm not coming here at night, I thought, remembering when I opened the back door and stepped into the patio. A cold breeze stroked my face and sent shivers across my back. So I hurried to go back as quickly as I could. To be honest, I was a little spooked going outside in the darkness, knowing that the woods were pretty much a few steps away. I finished doing my business, washed my hands, and started walking back, being careful not to trip on something because the light bulb was almost non-existent. I was about halfway when I heard a noise to my left. Like someone stepped on a branch and broke it. I stopped and quickly turned, trying to see what made the noise, but I could only see a portion of the fence and nothing but darkness beyond that. However, I had the weird feeling that someone or something was watching me. Something on the other side of the fence. I stood there in silence for around 30 seconds, listening to the surroundings, only to notice the crickets had stopped chirping. I got a bit freaked out because I knew for sure that they were chirping when I first got out. I was somewhat scared to move, but I did anyways, almost running to get inside as soon as possible. When I returned, I went to my girlfriend, who was already in the living room, laying down on the couch with a blanket on top. She noticed I was a bit agitated and asked me what was wrong. "Your patio is scary," I jokingly said, not wanting to tell her that I felt very scared because she hates anything that has to do with horror or scary stuff. I decided to brush it off, so I went around the couch and sat at the other end of it, putting my girlfriend's legs on my lap and asking what she was watching on the TV. I turned to my right and noticed there was a huge window on the side of the wall that gave me a perfect view of the patio. I didn't see it before because it was next to a cabinet being covered on the way in the living room. Now that I knew about it, I kept turning to see the outside, still thinking of how scary it looked. As we were watching a boring documentary, I took off my girlfriend's socks and started to rub her feet below the blanket. After all, it was a chilly night and her feet were cold. We didn't have much conversation. I was getting sleepy, but after around 20 minutes, I started hearing noises outside. Noises that seemed to be coming from the patio. I grabbed the controller and muted the TV to make sure I was hearing right. And I was. It sounded like tiny twigs breaking and grass being brushed. I quickly turned to my right to see outside the window, but I could only see the plants and part of the trunk from a big tree. The noise, although faint, stopped for a few seconds and resumed a few moments later. It stopped again. I stood frozen watching outside the window, almost as if waiting for something to appear. "What is this noise?" I whispered to my girlfriend. But after I didn't get a reply, I turned around and stood up a little to see that she had her eyes closed and had fallen asleep. I was a bit freaked out, but I chose to believe it was probably a coyote or some other animal that lurks around the woods at night. I kept watching the TV muted, waiting for the noise to start again. But after a while, I realized it had stopped. I turned around one more time to see outside the window, and I felt my heart sink to my stomach. The first thing I noticed when I looked outside that time was a faint image of a gray, pale, and tall humanoid figure, peeking from the side of the big tree, staring right back at me. I suddenly froze in fear, not wanting to even slightly move or breathe. I watched this thing as it watched me, even though I couldn't see its eyes because of the poor lighting. But I just knew it was watching me. I knew it was aware of me. I somehow felt it. The creature was, like I said, pale. Really pale. I could see the contrast between its skin and the bark on the tree. The creature was very thin and really skinny with shoulders and torsos that was not so broad, as well as an elongated neck. It looked like it was around 6 or 7 feet tall. Unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, I could not distinguish in detail any facial features because of how dark it was, but I could perfectly picture it in my head, the shadowy areas around where eyes should have been, and the huge other one where the mouth would be. It was sort of grinning. At this point, I was trembling a little, and I wanted to let my girlfriend know what I was witnessing, but I didn't want to move a muscle or break eye contact with that thing. I felt like I needed to remain still or play dead to lose its attention. But no, the creature kept staring at me, not moving an inch, like it was trying to do the same. Then, to turn things worse, the creature started to make this echoey clicking sound, kind of like a frog, but slower. I noticed it began to turn its head to the left, and then turn it back to look at me really fast. I didn't know what to think anymore. All I wanted was my girlfriend to wake up and prove to me that this thing was real. I began whispering her name, and not even wanting to move my jaw, but she wouldn't wake up. And the thing kept doing the same, turning its head to the left and back to me really fast. The creature kind of crouched, like when a big predator cat is hunting its prey. It looked like it was preparing to attack. "What the fuck?" I whispered. I know, stupid. I didn't even think of it. The fact that my girlfriend started moving, and that thing noticed both of us. But I was so scared that I kept trying. This went around for maybe less than 15 minutes before I realized I still had my girlfriend's foot in my hand below the blanket, so the thing would not be able to see me moving. Only using my wrist, I slightly pulled her foot back and forth, whispering her name again and again, but no response. Then I stood in shock when I saw the creature stand up again and started walking backwards, still looking at me and disappearing into the darkness of the patio, doing the clicking sounds again. I was freaking out and blinked a few times, realizing my eyes itched from staring at the creature the whole time. For some reason, I couldn't turn my head around. I kept looking in the direction where the creature disappeared, listening for sounds, and waiting for it to appear once again. A few minutes passed, and I took the chance to turn around, slowly, as if in slow motion. I turned my head to my girlfriend and started calling her name louder, while pushing her leg and quickly scribbling my fingers on the sole of her foot to wake her up fast. Her foot jerked as she started turning. I stood up, and I was patting her on the shoulder, telling her, "Hey, wake up, baby, come on, we gotta go." She opened her eyes and squinted at me, adjusting to the light of the TV, wondering why I'd woke her up. I kept telling her to remain still and silent when I heard the sound again. She looked at me and noticed the concern in my eyes, and asked, "What's wrong?" "Shh, shh, be quiet." I followed, putting 2 fingers on her lips and looking into her eyes. I could see that she was getting freaked out, and I don't blame her. I would be too if someone woke me up looking scared and telling me to be quiet. The clicking sound went off again, but it was louder this time, almost like this thing was on the other side of the window. This time, both of us heard the noise, and we stood looking at each other in silence, getting more and more scared. "What is that?" my girlfriend asked, but I remained quiet. Again, in slow motion, I started to turn my head to the window to check, and there it was. The thing was right outside the window, only a couple feet away and staring right back at me. This time, I had a clearer vision of how it looked. I was wrong. I was petrified in fear when I noticed it didn't have a mouth where a person would have. Instead, the mouth was on its neck, which opened horizontally, not vertically. As its mouth opened, it vibrated with the clicking sounds, and hundreds of really small razor-like teeth shined with the window glare. It had oval-shaped eyes that were dark as the night. I felt its gaze pierce through my soul. I started shaking and breathing faster, not believing what I was seeing. My girlfriend peeked by my side to see what I was looking at, I instantly felt her body tense up under me as she started to ask me in a trembling voice what that thing was. But no answer came out of me. Now we were both scared to even move a muscle. After the humanoid noticed my girlfriend move, it gave a step forward and lowered its head, almost as if it was scanning us. We jumped in fear after seeing the thing doing this, because we thought it would start coming towards us. My heart was pounding so fast that I thought I would faint any time. Then, the thing began to walk slowly to the right, in the direction where the door was, resuming the clicking sounds. If you have seen the movie Signs, and remember the scene where the humanoid came out of the bushes outside the house, that would be an accurate representation of what we saw. We took a good look at every inch of this thing's body. It walked with its head turned to us. After we lost sight of it through the window, we both sat up and looked at each other, when suddenly we heard something scratch the metal door that led to the corridor, as if the thing was grazing its fingers on it. Without thinking twice, I grabbed my girlfriend's wrist and jolted out of the living room, locking ourselves in her bedroom. We sat on the floor right next to the bedroom, hiding in the case that this thing got inside. The scratching sounds continued, and my girlfriend started to sob, still asking about what we saw. I felt powerless knowing I couldn't do much to reassure her. I could only hold her and hope that this thing would give up and leave. The noise continued for a bit, maybe about 3 more minutes, when it suddenly stopped. Then, we began hearing footstep noises all around the house. So, we kept turning to whatever direction we heard the noise come from. Eventually, the noises ceased, and after an hour or so, we figured the creature had left. My girlfriend, still in tears in her eyes, told me if we could lay in bed. I agreed because my back was hurting from being in the crouched position for over an hour. We slowly crawled into the bed, making the least noise possible, and covering ourselves with another blanket. "Don't worry, baby. Everything is going to be okay tomorrow. Try to get some sleep," I told her as I tightened her in my grip. She didn't reply. After a while, she fell asleep again. I didn't get a minute of sleep that night. I kept my eyes open, listening to every sound around us. The next day, we didn't even want to touch the subject. All we said was that the creature was not from this world. My girlfriend said she felt the creature's gaze pierce into her, almost as if the thing was just something with a pierced sight that could just see you straight through you. Nothing else was said, and we left sort of traumatized from that. Days after the encounter, we both suffered from nightmares. She mentioned that she sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, screaming and trembling, and wouldn't be able to stop until her mom would check on her. The fences that separated the patio and the woods had been redone since. They now stand at 2 meters tall, blocking any easy access from the woods. Before this, they had to make sure they didn't have to go outside at night. They haven't had any other encounters again, but my girlfriend insists that the patio gives her chills at night. I keep wondering what that thing was. That humanoid creature. Maybe it was an alien. What do you guys think? So I live in the Dallas, Texas area, and one night, back when I was around 18, I had just dropped off my girlfriend at the time at her house. It was around 9-ish in the evening, and the sun had already gone down. Her house was located in an area that was comprised of fields, creeks, and woods, broken up by 1 or 2 high-end neighborhoods. The road I was driving on headed away from the neighborhood into a more sparsely populated area before ending in a T intersection. To the left of me was a small abandoned church, and to the right sat a field that was surrounded in barbed wire fence. Taking a minute to rest and think about my day, I spent more time than was needed at the stop. Getting ready to pull out, I looked off to my left. Then I looked to my right and froze. Laying in the ditch opposite of me was what appeared to be a man. It was laying prone with its arms extended onto the road, and it appeared to be naked. Then it started crawling forward. Its legs were bent at an unnatural angle. Imagine, or take the time to try this, laying on your stomach. Put your knees up under your armpits. Then, moving forward, extend your hand out with the pad resting on the ground and extend out the opposite leg. Needless to say, it was fast. The last thing I noticed as it passed through my headlights was its skin. It was cracked and horrifically off color, as if someone had doused it in gasoline and set it on fire. Within seconds, this burnt monstrosity had cleared the road and vanished into the field on my right. Needless to say, I headed home at a much faster pace than I normally would have. I do not know what this burned creature was, but I'm hoping I never see it ever again.